Welcome, Owen. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Excited. Alrighty, so next up we have false reporting with Aidan and Owen through SafeBAE. Anyways, thank you guys so much, and I'll let you guys get started.
Sweet, thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you so much.
I will share my screen and we can get going. Boom. Share. Send. And there we go. So we are super excited to bring this to you today. We think it's a super important topic and we want to explore it and what's behind it. Give me 1 second. Okay. So on the agenda for today, we are going to do some check-ins kind of to get everybody involved. We are going to talk about why false reporting is a myth, why it is so dangerous, and what you all can do to help with it.
Oh, and I don't know if your screen is
Can you?
I think it's frozen. It's on the first slide and it's not, looks like it's presenting.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I will stop the share. Give me 1 second.
I can give it a try if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it. I was in the
I'm not a host actually.
Okay.
Oh, and you can hand hosting over to Aidan.
Okay. I do that. Make host.
Awesome. Let me see. Alrighty, is this working?
There we go.
Oh, does it work for you? Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, today for the just agenda, start out with check-ins, just try to, I think it's really important for me, at least when conducting a workshop like this, to have a pretty open and sort of friendly feeling, just like feeling in the space. So I don't know, feel free to unmute, chime in, message, chat, all of that, so we can really like maximize the amount of learning that can take place.
Absolutely.
So my name is Aidan. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his. I am 18 years old. I'm from Falmouth, Maine, and I've lived in Maine my whole life. About a year ago, maybe a little more, an organization very similar to SafeBAE came into my school to give a training on healthy masculinity, and I found it so gripping. I didn't really expect to, but I found it so gripping that I wanted to get more involved. So I got involved with that organization, then later SafeBAE. So that's sort of the path I went on to find myself here. And this is my good friend and colleague in a lot of this work, Owen.
Yeah, so I'm Owen Stefanakos, also he, him, his pronouns. I got involved in this work through the same organization, Maine Boys to Men. I am 18 from Freeport, Maine, and I joined their youth council and then found out about SafeBAE and have been with them since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just to sort of get everybody going and excited, I'd love if everybody sort of grabbed a pen and paper or mentally made a note of their top 3 Pixar movies and either put them in the chat or just chimed in and like talked them at us just to sort of get us thinking. We had originally thought about using breakout rooms, but it doesn't look like that'll be possible. So just write them down and just sort of to get those creative juices flowing and make sure we're all in the right headspace for this. Personally, my top Pixar movie is Up. I think that first little scene is awesome, and I don't know, always makes me cry. I love it.
Yeah, for me it's it's The Incredibles, Up, and Wall-E. I think that would round out the top 3 for me. Yeah. So if any of you, nice.
Awesome. Inside Out. I love that one.
That's super good.
Wall-E.
Monsters, absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of good ones. Finding Nemo.
Monsters, Inc.
I love it. Seems to be a theme here. People seem to be really loving Monsters, Inc.
A Bug's Life is also, yeah. Alrighty, well, thank you guys so much for sort of participating. I know that it can seem like not really super on the topic, but I think it is super important. So thanks everybody for contributing that.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. So before we really jump in, it's really important to acknowledge a couple things. First of all, the most important thing for learning is that you take care of yourself. So get water, go to the bathroom, turn off your screen, get up, walk around, and make sure that you are providing yourself with the correct surroundings and headspace to be able to have this be productive and
be able to really absorb it in the way that we are looking to.
Right. And this presentation deals with topics surrounding sexual assault and rape. So feel free to do what you need to take care of yourself, seek help, step out, reset. If you do wish to seek help, you can do so through many of these organizations, all of them. And so I totally invite you to screenshot this slide or take note if you find necessary. I also know that there were resources placed in the chat at the beginning of this. Awesome. Let's jump in. Why is the myth of false reporting so prevalent? Go for it, Owen.
Yeah, so it's a really tricky one, and when you approach it from different angles, such as the fact that no one wants to think that someone in their community could have done something that they wouldn't want to think of them as a friend if they had. And I think that it's very hard, and many people choose an out, that out being to say that it must not be true. And so I think that psychological twist right there is huge for the myths surrounding false reporting. And I think that what we are going to try and do in this presentation is show that the reason why it's a myth is that those are not statistically backed up, right? That there are stories about certain instances where that has occurred, but that when you look at the bigger picture and try and look at the statistical evidence, that is not backed up. So, yeah.
Yeah. It would also be great if you guys now can sort of reflect, and before we get into it, try to think about what you guys know now and put it in the chat. Why do you think the myth of false reporting is so prevalent? So love to get an idea of what we think, and I think it's always awesome to sort of process what I don't know, what we think. So it'd be great if you could toss those
And
in.
if anybody wants to chime in, without your video or whatever, you're welcome to. But however you feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I can answer, in my experience, people don't want to believe that about their like friends and families, and or about themselves, and of course they don't want to be charged with whatever crimes they may have committed, and they also they want to change people's perspective, and they want to keep committing those acts without fault from other people.
Yeah, thank you so much for chiming in. I want to highlight something that you said that sort of made me think a little bit. The second thing, that they don't really want to believe that about themselves. And if you see, it's tough to come to the conclusion that people, as Owen said, the people who you may know are in your community are capable of committing egregious acts.
Yeah.
Ooh.
There we go. I think that we're gonna touch on that more. I just saw this last one in the chat. We're gonna touch on that more later, but I think that Rachel made a great point about media attention, and that when, even if it is not intentional from the media sources, if they are choosing these stories that they know are going to get a lot of attention because they are emotional and are going to get people invested in the story, that makes, when someone hears a story of someone false reporting, they kind of jump on that and then lodge that in their head as something that happens often. And again, that's what we are going to try and do in this presentation, is shed some light on the fact that that may not be as statistically relevant as it is culturally thought out to be.
Yeah. Alrighty. Oh, you want to take this slide?
Absolutely. So early studies on sexual violence, these are some of the reasons why false reporting became societally prevalent. So the miscategorization of false reporting in situations where there was little physical evidence. So in situations where it was really a he said, she said, and they were not able to tell for sure, and the default was to believe that someone was lying. And so I think that was one of the instances, and that it has also been currently widely disproven, as societal understanding of rape has helped the public understand that not all rapes are violent, that there are a lot of different types of sexual assault, and it is not all as clear cut as would be easy to believe.
Absolutely.
Aidan.
Yeah. So I think that it's, first of all, important to address from my the feelings of people who may not yet know all of the data surrounding this. Personally, before I started researching this, I would hear stories of my friends who had gotten falsely accused of rape. One in particular, a friend of mine or a friend of a friend, went to a different school in high school, and he got falsely accused of rape, and he it was proven definitively that he did not commit the act, but
He was somewhere very, very different. And yeah, go ahead.
And his life at that his entire life sort of ground to a halt, and he had to sort of start over. And so that idea to me is scary. That makes me feel scared. And so I absolutely, and now after I've done more research, I absolutely understand why, and I've talked to other people, and it also, the stories like that make them feel scared. But that really is the outlier, and it is that perpetuates the a lot of unhealthy aspects of society. I don't know if Owen, you want to chime
Yeah,
in?
so I think that in the similar way to media reporting on stories such as that, that kind of thing can get spread very easily and then is thought of as being a serious possibility. And I think that what is, again, so important is to make sure that you are thinking about all of these scenarios, trying to take that fear out of it and trying to look at what is happening from a logical perspective. So that would be my thought. So Shale actually told us this statistic, which is crazy, but kind of goes to show the likelihoods, which is that young men are more likely to be raped themselves than to be falsely accused of raping someone, which that doesn't mean that the probability of being falsely accused of rape is nothing. It does occur, but it is not as statistically relevant as we have been led to believe.
And in addition, it's important to counteract that base emotion of just ooh, I feel afraid of getting falsely accused of rape, with facts and being able to think that, wow, actually, even though I may feel scared, I feel personally, after I've learned all this, much less scared because the facts sort of are on my side.
Yeah, so in addition to the fear, there are those old false studies that we talked about earlier that kind of add to this societal problem. There is the media reporting of false accusations. That's what we were talking about earlier, right? That's a way that a lot of people can hear about a story and then latch onto it, and assign it more value than it has. There's the tendency to disbelieve that these horrible crimes can be committed by average people, and even more than that, by people that you know, or just people that are in your community, and that you feel as though it's so easy to set these crimes aside and say that those aren't people like me, those aren't people that I would know. That is other people, worse people, people who don't have the same moral integrity, and recognizing that it can happen and does happen in all different communities. Aidan, do you want to take the next three?
Yeah, absolutely. Mislabeling of assaults by untrained law enforcement. So especially historically, you see this trend. All of these cases are very nuanced, and it is often poor training or knowledge from law enforcement causes them to be mislabeled and to appear and that causes the statistics to appear skewed. Pressures from law enforcement to decide on prosecution too quickly. So yeah, Owen?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I think that one kind of comes into the, like what Aidan was saying earlier about how oftentimes these cases are more subtle, and or historically people thought, as we were saying earlier, that sexual assault and rape was one thing and that it could be clearly distinguished. And so law enforcement would put aside many cases as not being rape or sexual assault because they did not have the same classification. So
yeah. And finally, pressure for a polygraph test. So all of these are, as Owen said, sort of that idea of moving away from maybe the nuance of a situation, or and just sort of rashly try to push something through.
now this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, about the danger, like how bad is this for the community? How bad is it for this this belief to exist? And so we just wanted to explore what that would look like. And the results are survivors not being able to come forward for fear of being accused of lying, for fear of having the community that they are a part of. And now it's even bigger with the internet, but that for fear of being accused, gaslighted, like there is nothing more terrifying than that loneliness. And
false accusations, somebody told me today that false accusations is just like gaslighting turned up to 11. It's just which is really, really toxic and really counterproductive to the idea that we want rape and sexual assault to decrease and stop. I also think that what was I going to say? It's creating a culture where survivors are the ones who are believed first and foremost, is super important, so that we can, because the statistics and the data really backs up that most people are, like the vast majority of people are telling the truth, and so believing them is paramount.
I think that what Aidan just said is great, because it's that it isn't that it's always blindly believe that no matter what, survivors are telling the truth, and or someone who is coming out with an accusation. It's that the default, if you are able to make the default be to believe someone, and then if the evidence points towards something else, then that can be examined. But I think that it is the hopping on the train of disbelief that becomes extremely dangerous. So the second one is just that survivors seeking justice outside of the legal system by reporting to the general public or through social media, which again, social media makes this all go up so much more, because it allows the it allows kind of the mob culture on either side, right? If it could be if someone is accusing someone of falsely reporting, and then the hordes of people that could come together, it's just a massive pool that can be drawn from, and that can go the other way as well. So it's just we
have a legal system for a reason. It would be great to be able to use it. Sorry, was somebody contributing? Right, I'll move on, but feel free to definitely chime in if you have something to say. Owen, take it. Absolutely.
So these are just some characteristics that can be identified as markers for potential false reporters. And again, these are not like you see someone with any of these points and you can even assume that they would be a false reporter. This is just another tool to keep in your mind when making these judgments for yourself. Because again, that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to give you as many tools as you can to make these judgments and to make the most logical decision, because it really is so hard when, especially when there's a lack of evidence and law enforcement isn't able to and or isn't even involved. So I think that it's just important that you have a good tool set. So a history of false reporting of other crimes, a history of attention and sympathy seeking, and that I think that one is overly portrayed as the reason. I think that I often hear people say that people are looking for attention, and that is, I would assume, to be one of the less likely out of these reasons. So I think that, again, just to make sure that you are not assuming that if you see someone who is attention seeking, who has had an accusation, that it's just super important to, let me see, there's something in the chat, but a history of mental instability. And again, the result of this can be survivors seeking justice outside of the legal system and reporting it to the general public or social media.
So I just want to highlight what's been said in the chat. It's been said that it's really difficult to see mental health diagnosis as a characteristic of false reporting when we know that folks with mental health issues are often more likely to be assaulted. And thank you so much for bringing this forward. I think this is a super important thing to highlight. And as Owen said earlier, these characteristics are by no means like catch-all or even by no means catch-all. And I think that it's important to I think it's really important to, in places like this, work to lead with a confident and educated stride. So educate yourself first and sort of use how you feel to bring yourself. Yeah, Owen, were you?
I wasn't saying anything. I mean, I think that, as I said, that's a great point. And I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but again, we are presenting these as more tools that you can use to help in your decision-making process. Yeah.
But I mean, I would just add that, your decision-making process should be first and foremost to believe survivors.
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, you can choose to look at these, but if not, trust your confident, well-educated opinion. Owen, do you want to take the last one?
Yeah, I think I already said that, but I similarly to the last slide, just that, yeah.
We definitely covered that. I wonder why that's there. Other motivations
I'm sure in the chat.
Filing a false report. Oh, are you reading somebody in the chat?
Yeah. No, go ahead. I'll respond after.
Other motivations include providing an alibi, i.e. was unfaithful to a partner, missed curfew, anger or revenge, a desire for attention, mental illness if a patient is pursuing, and sorry, that's an undegraded victim to report against their reluctance, parents seeking charges for statutory rape.
So I'm just to respond to the what Ali said in the chat, that absolutely, I think that law enforcement can succumb to the same pitfalls as any other person, primarily being that not wanting to believe that someone in their community, or just finding it easier to believe that someone wouldn't have committed a crime that they would not thought possible. So yeah.
Alrighty. Owen, do you have anything to add to this this slide?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the example that Aidan provided at the beginning of our acquaintance who had been falsely accused, and I mean that story was spread around in a way that was not indicative of how likely it would have been to happen, or of how serious it was. But I just remember that the reason behind it was that he had just broken up with his girlfriend, and it seemed to be pretty messy. It did not end well, and so I think that anger or revenge would have been the kind of the one for that scenario.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So this is really the key, right? This is the point of action. And as we've been saying throughout this, if there's one thing to take away, it is to have your default be to believe survivors, because if everyone just did that, more often than not, they would be right. And that would be a massive step in the right direction. So again, the first and foremost step is to believe and support survivors. And then I would say that the next step would be to, when after you have had your default be to believe the survivor, to take a step back and make sure that if there is that type of mob mentality over social media or just among groups of people, to call someone out for falsely accusing, to take a step back and to make your judgments logically and not based off of your relationship with the accused person or with your connection within a community. And I think that's key. And that's another one that if you're able to make that step, I think that can help curb a lot of those tidal waves of movement. And then lastly, to educate yourself by coming to summits like this, by talking to people, by trying to have these conversations and learn more, because we can always learn more. And we are, as a society, learning more as we go. And I think that is, if you are able to educate yourself and then educate others in a way that is constructive, I think that's also a super important point.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Owen. I actually might add one. And I think it sort of tacks on to educate yourself and others, but something I try to do with my friends and family and peers is just to promote the environment that it's okay to have these sorts of conversations, to talk about rape and sexual assault and get that line of dialogue flowing.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not. What's up? I'm just giving you a hard time. How are you doing? Welcome back.
And I gotta tell you the two that I've experienced.
Do you have time now? Would you like to?
So that it's important to open up lines of dialogue so that you and your peers and friends can, and this is mostly my perspective as a youth, because in places where education around these topics sometimes aren't the most robust, and you kind of have to come to your own conclusions sometimes. Having these conversations as often as you can and making them not a taboo conversation, not a conversation that you should worry about having, and not a conversation that only takes place after some egregious act takes place. By doing those three things, it makes it much more possible to have a culture among your friends, among your peers, where if something like this does happen, you have the toolbox, you have the knowledge, you have the vocabulary to address this that you might not before. So that would be my more broad what can you do, but it's have these conversations about this sort of thing. What do you think about that, Owen?
Aidan, I think that's actually a really great point, and that kind of plays into to the fact that people don't want to think about this kind of thing. It's like people just in general, as the rule of thumb, want to push away things that are painful, things that are messy, things that hurt. And it's not an easy topic to talk about, but I think that, Aidan, you're so right that if it becomes more not just culturally acceptable, but culturally normal to have these conversations. And as Aidan said, to have an open dialogue, I think that would, in addition to all of these other things that one could do, I think that would make a huge difference as far as removing the taboo and making it easier to accept something as being true.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, absolutely. If I can point to one thing that my work at SafeBAE and similar work has done for me, is given me the tools to have these conversations. And when stuff has popped up in my life with my friends that needs to be dealt with, and we don't know where to go or have the resources or know where the resources are, we at least have the knowledge and the knowledge that we've talked about this before, and have a understanding as a friend group, as a school, about these issues.
And yeah, it really is bravery to be able to have these conversations. So this is an activity that we do a lot with Boys to Men, but it's always a great way to wrap up a discussion. So we think about our hands as being what we've learned today. If there's anything new, maybe you already knew everything that we talked about, but then there's also the head, about what you're thinking about, what's going through your mind right now, and your feet, which is like that last step, what you are motivated to do.
Yeah, so if we can take a few minutes and think about, just come up with one thing, put in the chat, or just voice it to us about one thing you've learned, one thing you've been thinking about, and one thing you're motivated to do. That'd be awesome. Oh, do you want to, is there stuff in the chat? Sorry, it's tough to
Yeah,
see.
no, that's what I'm looking at right now. Yeah, that I mean, that's a great point, and I think that we've seen that a lot.
Can you read it out?
Yeah, sorry. So it's the Kendall said that, I think that one thing to acknowledge and discuss with friends is how the narrative of false reporting sexual assault likely relates to white women falsely accusing Black men of rape and other crimes, and not believing Black women when they report. And again, I think that's a great point. I think that there are so many other, we got a lot to work on as a society. And I think that is one of the most deeply rooted historical pits of racism that we have in this country. So Aidan, if you have any direct responses.
No, I am just glad that that got highlighted because that is a super important aspect of this presentation. So thank you. So what would be great right now is if people took, 3 to 5 minutes to just think about one of each things, pop it in the chat. We can go over it and sort of unpack together. Thank you guys so much for being such an awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah, we
Thank
got
you. You got that right in. So, she said that the miscategorization in early sexual violence studies is an interesting fact to have on hand and was new to me. Yeah, so that historically speaking, that those studies really did not look at it. I mean, when you break it down, they just weren't good science, right? Like they had so many flaws and sources of error. And then she's thinking about how we can effectively train folks in the legal system on these issues to help turn off the tide. I think that's great. And how to, I think it was said earlier in the chat, but how to make sure that, because again, these are very subtle topics and subtle issues, especially in a world such as the legal system, where you want to have a smoking gun, you want to have video evidence, and you want to have things that are super clear and decisive, and to change the way that whole system works. Yeah, absolutely. Aidan, can you see the chat?
Yeah, I just figured out.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, so all these look awesome. Thank you guys so much. I just addressing the question about race. Is there research about whether or not race impacts false reporting? Yes, there is research. And I do not have it in front of me, but I am sure that race plays a large role. So that's always a good thing to think about.
Yeah, I think kind of just piggybacking off of what Aidan said, I think that as a society, we are realizing how important it is to do research on these topics, to kind of like shed light on what has been happening as a society for forever. And so I think that more and more there is research coming out about the connections between racism and false reporting, about false reporting in general. And so, yeah, definitely worth some research.
I'd love to highlight what Ali said. She said, I'm definitely motivated to have these conversations more. And I'm thinking about how the legal system needs to change to better support survivors. I think that's awesome. And I strive to uphold those values. Yeah. So thank you so much, Ali.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the last one in the chat, which is talking about how they're thinking about how linked anti-racism work is directly related to violence prevention. And I think that one of the things that as a society we are coming to more and more is that nothing is isolated. It's not as though violence prevention is completely isolated from the racial issues and issues of class, and all of these things are connected, some more than others. And so I think that those are some of the things that as a society we need to look at and try and like just take a hard look at what is connected, because that can help us know where we need to go in the future. And I think that out of these three, right out of the hands, head, and feet, I like to focus on the feet, because that's the one that causes change. That's the one that changes the world for the better. And so.
Oh, and what are your feet today?
what are my feet today? I think that that's a great question. I think that this has re-upped my determination, because it's surprisingly prevalent how often these conversations come up about like someone saying that false reporting has occurred, and I think that I am more empowered to try and stop the person who's said that and approach them with a, like, did you know that the odds are pointing very strongly against that as being the case. So yeah, I think just being a better upstander.
Yeah, awesome. I
and
would
what
say
about you?
that mine is to re-up my efforts to educate myself, similar to you, so that I can, when I have these conversations, that I'd love to have these conversations, so when I have them, I am more informed and more able to bring about change in the world slowly but surely. So I'm going to stop share. If anybody wants, we have 5 minutes left before our cap. So if anybody wants to chat, ask questions, definitely feel free to do so.
Yeah, like, again, if I think that if we could leave with anything from this conversation, it is to set the default to believing survivors, and
Absolutely.
to try and, in as constructive of a way as possible, let the people around you know that that is the best way to approach this, and that you support that community. So
yeah.
Alrighty, I don't know if there's any more questions in the chat. Oh, there is. Okay, I'll let you guys answer that.
okay, I thank you, Kendall. I'm not sure. I will look into that. And do you know?
I do not know, but I'm
It's
sure
every state has a different policy, and policies are starting to change. Canada's a little ahead of us on the curve, but we do have lots of different statutes of limitations on sexual assault disclosures, and they have not been broadly eliminated yet, but some states are starting to take a look at them.
Thanks, Cheryl.
And then Allie said, do you think that victim blaming and false reporting are connected? And I think that they are more connected than many other things. I think that I think that absolutely, like, if you think about it, it comes from the same place. It comes from defensiveness. It comes from seeing the victims and survivors as the enemy, as the people who are going to make your life worse. And so
the exact opposite of the attitude that we want, right?
Exactly. Like, that's so dangerous, because fear is a very powerful motivator. And I think that if there's not an easy way to turn off that button, but yeah, absolutely connected. Thank you, Allie.
Yeah, also just because we only 2 minutes left, just want to thank each and every one of you for participating, for working to educate yourself, and for actively participating in this conversation through the chat. So just know that each one of you guys are awesome, and by doing this, you're taking steps in the right direction.
And as we said, like, you are checking off one of the boxes on what you can do to help. You are educating yourself, and that is if more people tried to educate themselves in any of these topics, that would make the world a better place. So go you.
So there's a question in the chat. Do you think if schools did a better job of educating on consent and communication, people would be less afraid of being falsely accused? I think
So-
that so many things would be better if schools did a better job of educating on consent and communication. Like, I think that is one of the top things that just needs to happen. Owen, do you want to?
But yeah, so I agree. I think that the more understanding, because again, as we've tried to portray in this discussion, if you just look at it from a logical perspective, you should be more afraid of being raped yourself as a man than of being falsely accused of rape. So I think that if this conversation was had, if people understood the statistics and the reality behind it, they would know that it really isn't as terrifying as people think. And so that's a great way to combat that fear that drives this mob mentality.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
great point.
Yeah, I think it's 5:50. So I think we should call it there. Thank you everybody again so much. This has been awesome.
Absolutely great, gentlemen. This was a great presentation, and you know, I really appreciate seeing young men really participate in this conversation, really dispel the myths and educate people around the realities. Like you said, the more we can engage young men in these conversations, the better we all become educated, right? To dispel the myths. So we really appreciate you. Great job. You know what, everybody, we have some more really fantastic things coming. So make sure you're following SafeBAE on all social media. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. Alana, I saw you just pop off. You want to come back? You have something you want to say? Where you went? Oh, and you're staying around for Missionary Impossible, right? I hope so. Hey, Z.
Hey.
Awesome. I see the Teens Pack team is getting ready to do their thing.